Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Straight from the Heart. Straight from the Heart are authentic conversations that capture the life of leaders, thinkers, gurus. And today we have one special person who's also a designer over and above all the traits that I mentioned. Meet Ayse Birsel, who's my guest and fellow colleague of MG100. It's a great pleasure to have you for this conversation, Ayse.
It's my privilege. Thank you.
Let me briefly introduce Ayse. She's a renowned designer, and not just any designer, but design the life that you love. I'll talk about that a little later. She's one of the Fast Company's most creative people in 2017. She's the author of book Design the Life That You Love, which I've been reading. And yesterday I had the privilege of attending her session. It was truly exhilarating and experiential. I really enjoyed Ayse.
Thank you.
And she's also on Thinkers 50 shortlist for talent. So with this background, Ayse, I would like to ask the question, what does the meaning of Ayse stand for?
So Ayse is a Turkish name, but it comes from Arab.
Hmm.
And when you use it in Turkish, people don't associate a meaning to it. But I looked it up and it means life giver.
Life giver. And do you see a correlation between your name and the work that you are doing?
I do actually.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So tell us briefly about you, what defines you, and what has been your journey up till now.
So what defines me, I see myself as a designer, or in other words, a problem solver. And I'm really interested in helping people have better lives, whether it's through industrial design, designing products, systems, services, but also, as you mentioned, by applying design principles to our life and helping people design a better life for themselves.
Yeah, and that's a very noble way of thinking, using construct and principles to. It's the biggest project. Life is the biggest project.
That's what I think, that our life is our biggest project, and we can all design our life intentionally and live original lives.
Did the D school initially think of such an idea that design thinking would be used for designing the life?
I think it originated with me.
Oh, fantastic. So, how did you stumble upon this idea of design the life that you love? And what impact do you wish to create?
So the way the idea came from is I had been designing products, office systems for Herman Miller, kitchen products for Target, uh, products for HP, concept automobiles and interiors for Renault. And and out of that experience, I decided to think about how I think and developed a process called deconstruction reconstruction, which today is the red thread across all our work. But once I had the process, I thought, well, I think intuitively that my life is my biggest project, and now that I have a design process, can I apply my process to my life? And so it started as an experiment. I mentioned it to a friend of mine who said, well, why don't you do a workshop about that? And she had a company called Academy of Life, about teaching people lessons you don't learn at school. And so I said yes and developed the curriculum from scratch. I developed exercises, did the exercises myself. I was my first student. And then one day did a workshop with 12 people who were interested in designing their life. And it grew from there, word of mouth, and developed into, I had more examples from people doing it, refined it until it became a book. It became something that is the beginning of a movement.
Fantastic. You know how you've been working with products and then you got those intuitive triggers and you internalize them to create the greatest project of your life. Isn't that a nice feeling?
It is a great feeling. And helping people design their lives really has become my purpose, because it's transformational. It changes people's lives.
Yeah. And to me, it gives a feeling that you have a choice.
Yes.
If you want to exercise, there is something in your hand that you can do about that.
gives you a choice, and what I've realized is what you can imagine, you can make happen. So I give tools to people to help them in a very rational, structured, and actually simple way to imagine the life they love. And once they can articulate that, then you can make it happen, which is exactly how design works. If you can articulate an idea and imagine it, you get excited about it.
Yeah.
You feel like you're onto something, and then you put in place, the next steps to make it happen.
And I personally experienced that at HPI in Potsdam, where I had done my design thinking as a coach. The rush to get doing, the brain writing, when you start together doing something emerges. It's not keeping thoughts here, but putting on a piece of paper and going through the process. Thank you for sharing that. So in your journey of being a designer, what triggers and glitches, the problems came in your way, and how did you overcome them?
So the problems usually are, design is an investment, and yesterday I was also mentioning it requires courage because you're defining a future based on what you know today, and that's risky.
Yeah.
So that's also risky for manufacturers who are our biggest collaborators. So the glitch is, how do you show somebody the future and get them to feel comfortable about it when there are these, Fortune 100 or 500 companies investing in future, and they need to take some risks to be leaders, to do things that nobody has done before.
Yeah.
So the biggest piece of that is building trust, so that there is mutual trust between the designer and the manufacturer. And once you have that trust, and building of that trust is really, you need to demonstrate ideas and show what's possible, and share common values. So I find that my values are about how can I find simplicity on the other side of complexity? How can we be user-centered, really be ambassadors for the end users so that we're making their lives better? And so how can we be humanistic? And how can we make more with less? So, and I look for clients who have similar values, and who want to be leaders, who want to turn old problems into new solutions.
And the partnership is key.
Yes.
Because when a designer collaborates with the manufacturer, there are some basic conflicts. Who are you to tell me what will future look like? I know my job much better. So that part has to be managed with a lot of trust and empathy. Thank you for sharing that.
And if I may add to it, I think leaders in their industries often recognize that they need outsiders to help them imagine the future in new ways. Because when you're an outsider, you ask the questions that they're not asking, and you see things in new and different ways. So to me, what's most interesting in this collaboration is our client's expertise, which is vast, and our outsider's point of view and our expertise from different industries coming together, and then we start complementing each other. So it's very much a co-design process.
And I like the competency that you attach, which is about courage. One of my greatest learning about risk is when I got a new phrase in life where somebody said, let risk be your best friend in life. And I really looked at risk in a different light. And that has allowed me to do 6 career transitions effectively by just reframing risk as your best friend. What have been your 2 or 3 big learnings in this expedition of design the life that you love?
So one, there has been many learnings. I've been doing this almost for 8 years now. And one is design is truly transformational. And so I've been designing products and systems for about more than 20 years. But what I love about and I've seen it transform and help people's lives through products and services and experiences. But what I love about Design the Life You Love is it transforms people's lives without the intermediary of products or services. It's really you and your life together. So it's pure design. It gives me that opportunity to truly use design process and tools to help people transform their lives. So the other thing that I've learned is that ordinary people, and I call lovingly non-designers ordinary people, people who have no experience with design or creativity, I've found that they are extraordinarily creative.
Yeah.
And all they need, all that we need, is a process. And so my goal is to provide a very simple process, step by step, that allows you to go from today to the future. And as you experienced it yesterday.
Yeah, I was coming to that.
Yeah, it's almost magical. You know, people are surprised at what they come to at the end of the session.
Yeah, that simple exercise of drawing your neighbor a portrait, and through that small little framework initially was very overwhelming, but everybody got some closest form and shape. That was very exciting to see that. While working with individuals and organizations, when you are helping them design their future, what has been your greatest insights working with them?
My greatest insight has been often in organizations, people don't look at the same direction together. And we call this a shared mental model.
Okay.
You need to develop a shared mental model where everybody around the table, multidisciplinary, has one direction. They're all, that everybody is looking in the same direction, so that you can then go as a group, as a team, and build on each other's capabilities. So what we've been doing is using our process reconstruction with organizations to help them define a shared vision, again, using creative tools, so that they can have a vision that they've all contributed to, and that's where co-design comes into play, so that they can take ownership. But it's all building to go together in this one direction. They're often it's very divided, and people are not even aware they might not have a shared goal. And so it's making that apparent, and then working on, well, how are we going to execute on this?
In my work with people on creativity and design thinking, my first attempt is to break the myth that creative people are only few and born genetically. It's not so. Everyone can be creative.
Everyone can be creative, exactly.
Do you use, so I see a lot of aesthetics in design. Do you use those aesthetics in your personal life, choosing your clothes, choosing your place?
I'm not, I love dressing a certain way, so that comes from my mother. It doesn't even come from design. She was a wonderful dresser and really wanted us to look a certain way, and she installed that in my brother and I. So, but otherwise, I don't attach much to objects.
Okay.
I love designing them, but I find that the most important thing in my life is friendship and the relationship with people. And even in design, to me, at the end of the day, it boils down to people. And we make their lives better. And then the product is the intermediary.
So basis your experience, what really holds people back in embarking on design the life they love?
That's a great question. A lot of people have come to realize when they're designing their lives and they're deconstructing their lives. I would say about more than 70%, according to our surveys. The one thing that holds people back is themselves. And they come to this realization because before the workshop, many people think about, it's money, it's other people, it's opportunities, it's my boss. But then they come out of it and they realize a lot of those things are things that they can manage if they let go of fear and procrastination. So they admit that I'm the one between
me and my goals.
Me and my goals, exactly.
My experience has been that design thinking actually allows people to reframe their constraints into opportunities. And that has been one of the greatest breakthroughs which I have seen people arriving at that. Did you ever get stuck in designing the life that you love, and how did you overcome that?
Yes, I did get stuck, and I actually have learned not to mind getting stuck because it, like you said, in turning constraints into opportunities, sometimes being stuck gives you the time to reflect on how you can do things differently, or what kind of get creative about how to get unstuck. Because we all get stuck. And I find that the thing that helps me most is talking about that with my friends and collaborators and trusted people. And so to show some vulnerability and say, I'm stuck.
And that's where it invites so much of help from people.
Exactly. And, we're here for Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches. And Marshall always talks about that.
I need help.
I need help. And we can all give help and we can all receive help. That's his whole feed forward idea of.
This has been a fantastic journey of what you have been doing. If I ask you a question that if you were to travel back in time and place, where would you like to go and be?
I've thought about that, and every now and then, even with my kids, I have two daughters who are 13 and 14, and the one that's 13 years old has a great imagination, and she used to tell me, like, Mom, I would love to live in the 1940s. And she was very much influenced by the films she would see. And so I love your question. But the times I've thought about that, I feel most comfortable in the time I live in. So I don't have, my mind can travel into different times, but my time is now.
And as you were describing about your daughters, my daughter also loves the music of 60s, both Western and Indian classical, and she has a taste of that, despite being contemporary. I think there's something which you can borrow from there and yet live in the current.
Yes. And so, if I may, one more thing.
Sure.
My daughters love the Indian culture. And a lot of it, we haven't traveled to India, so a lot of it is from films like Slumdog Millionaire or Lion, or we've also started watching, Bollywood films and the dances and the music and the beautiful friendship between people.
I think it's a lot of emotional relationships which are depicted in our movies.
Yes.
And I see some resonance with the Middle Eastern culture, especially Turkey.
Yes, we are kind of you are in the center. We are on the west side, and I've also lived in Japan, which is the Far East.
Far East,
And yes, it's a continuum.
So in Bollywood, what do you like? Who do you like?
I knew you were going to ask me that, but I can't tell you a specific name just now because I just know that we go on Netflix and look at Indian movies and watch something. Any recommendations?
I'm sure I can recollect and share some of the names.
That would be great.
Okay, now moving on further, what is your greatest message that you can give to this audience who's going to watch this conversation, especially in the context of design the life they would want to love?
So my message would be that what I've learned through Design the Life You Love is that we are all designers, and there is something that's really meaningful for people at the intersection of life and design. We're drawn to it intuitively. We know that we can design our lives. And so what I've found is today things are changing so fast. And we don't quite have the roadmap that we grew up with. When you and I were growing up in different cultures, our parents probably gave us a very similar roadmap of, go to school, work hard, get a good job, get married, have kids, and that's a good life. But today, all of that is changing, and we're questioning everything, whether it's schools or where to live, how many careers to have.
What all choices that exist today were not there in our time.
Exactly. So my recommendation is, not having a roadmap is really a big challenge, but it's also an opportunity because it gives us the opportunity to come up with our own roadmap. And using the design process like the one that I'm using can help people define their own roadmap and do it with imagination and do it playfully, which is part of the components of when you're thinking about something that's as serious as your life, you need a little bit of levity to give you both empathy and optimism for a better solution. So in short, my message is create your own roadmap and have an original life, and you can do it by using design tools.
And once people drop the fear of judgment and they bring playfulness, creativity automatically emerges. And that used to be the case with every kid or when we were children. There were no norms. In absolute playfulness, we would come out with something really crazy. What's your process on a personal level that keeps you inspired to do things like that?
What keeps me inspired is to keep on learning and growing and experimenting, but to do it within the framework of my strengths, which is design and empathy for people.
Any particular message to women? You've been a successful woman. So how do they discover their leadership?
Well, there's a great book that Marshall wrote with Sally that I'm also planning on reading as a guideline to how women rise and learn from that. What I've found is working with mentors, men and women who believe. Marshall is a great example, Marshall Goldsmith, who believe in the leadership of and the power of women and help them rise. And we can only do this by giving women opportunities. And what I find that women in leadership roles, in my experience, help other women grow and rise. And so we need more women in leadership roles, in executive roles, as CEOs, and to help others come up. And one of the challenges right now is we're deficient in that. We don't have many, so that's where men leaders come into play, who know we need a 50-50 balance.
Thank you for sharing that. And let me tell you, this has been one of my most inspirational conversations. I truly enjoyed having this chat with you. And I'm also very happy and humbled and privileged to share the honors with MG100. So thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
Really
It's been
appreciate
my
it.
privilege.
Thank you.
I
Wish you all
loved
the
your
best.
questions.